I stood at my son's doorstep on Christmas Eve, holding a warm homemade pie in my hands. The moment I stepped inside, Mark looked me straight in the eye and said, "Dad, you're not welcome here this year." My heart stopped. The room turned cold, even though the fireplace was burning bright. I set the pie down on the table, my eyes sweeping across the house that every single dollar of mine had built. And in that instant, one thought flashed through my mind. This is only the beginning. You won't believe what I did next. My name is Richard Walker, 61 years old, once the owner of a small construction company in Dallas. After my wife passed away, I poured everything into my son, Mark. I sold my old truck, withdrew over $50,000 from my retirement fund, and even took out loans to help him buy this house. For 5 years straight, I sent him $3,000 every month to cover his debts. I truly believed I would always have a home to return to for the holidays. But right there, inside that very house, my son coldly repeated, "If you come, it'll make everyone uncomfortable." I froze. In front of me was the sofa I paid for, the Christmas tree I bought last year, the brand new kitchen set funded by my transfers. My voice cracked as I asked, "Uncomfortable? For who?" Mark lowered his head, unable to look me in the eye. I stood still, my hands trembling, as if a blade had just pierced my chest. And in my mind, only one vow remained. If they wanted to cast me aside, they would soon pay the price. That afternoon I went to Mark's house, carrying the apple pie I had baked myself. I had woken up early, kneaded the dough, sliced the apples, mixed the sugar and cinnamon. In my small, quiet apartment, the smell of the pie filled the air and gave me comfort as I pictured us all sitting together, enjoying it as a family. I stepped into the living room and placed the pie on the table. The whole house smelled of cinnamon candles, the glow of Christmas lights twinkling across the walls. I sank into the familiar leather sofa, silently hoping I'd soon hear my grandchildren laughing, or maybe my son asking how I'd been. But Mark said nothing. He sat across from me, his hands clenched tightly together. His eyes never met mine, fixed firmly on the floor. Something was wrong. "Mark, is everything okay?" I asked softly. He swallowed hard. After a long silence, he finally spoke, each word slow and heavy. "Dad, you can't come to Christmas dinner this year. Emily's family will be here, and they think your presence would make everyone uncomfortable." The words hit like a knife to the chest. My heart skipped. My ears rang. For a moment, I could hear nothing but the pounding of my pulse, drowning out even the crackle of the fireplace. Uncomfortable? My eyes swept the room. That leather sofa, I bought it. Those polished hardwood floors, I paid for them. The brand new kitchen appliances, my monthly transfers. Even the towering Christmas tree in the corner, glowing with lights, was one I had bought last year. Everything in this house bore my sweat, my sacrifice, my years of giving. And now I was being cast aside like an outsider. Uncomfortable. For who? I choked out, staring straight at him. "For you or for them?" Mark dropped his head, silent. He couldn't look at me. He couldn't answer. The room grew suffocatingly quiet. I could hear my own breathing grow heavy, my palms clammy, my hands trembling against my knees. Sweat beaded cold on my forehead, though outside the Dallas winter bit at the skin. Flashes of memory seared through me. When Mark was 10, I had worked nights on the construction site just to buy him the bicycle he dreamed of. On his wedding day, I covered every expense, even as debt piled on my shoulders. And now, that same son told me there was no place for me at his table. I wanted to scream. I wanted to remind him that without me, this house would not even exist. But the words caught in my throat. My vision blurred as hot tears welled up in my eyes. From the kitchen, Emily clattered dishes, pretending to be busy. She heard every word. Her silence, her indifference, it cut deeper than any insult. I knew then, This wasn't just Mark's decision. They had planned this together. I sat motionless. My eyes fell to my calloused hands resting on my knees. Hands that had once held hammers, bricks that had built a life for this boy. Now they trembled, weak and useless. Yet, deep inside, something else stirred. A fire, small but burning. I didn't argue. I didn't fight back. I simply stood, walked to the door, and left without another word. But as I stepped out into the cold Dallas night, one thought solidified in my mind. I stayed silent, but a decision had already been made. I stepped out of the house I had helped build, the door shutting behind me with the finality of a cold verdict. I stood still for a few seconds on the porch, the winter wind cutting through my worn coat, chilling me to the bone. Inside, Christmas lights still flickered. Laughter and voices spilled through the glass panes. Yet those sounds, once a comfort, now pierced me like knives. They no longer belonged to me. Out on the streets, Dallas glowed in the holiday season. Houses were strung with red, green, and golden lights. Families gathered in their yards, grilling meat, snapping pictures, children running around with carefree joy. The air carried the scent of roasted turkey, cinnamon, and fresh pine. For everyone else, this night was joy, togetherness, celebration. For me, it was nothing but a cruel reminder. I had been abandoned on the very night meant for family. I walked down the brick-paved sidewalk, each step echoing hollow, each step dragging the weight of humiliation with it. My thoughts drifted to Linda, my wife. She had been gone 7 years now, yet her face was as vivid as yesterday. Linda adored Christmas. Every year she hung a wreath on the front door, roasted the turkey, baked pudding for the whole family. She used to take my hand, smile, and whisper, "As long as we're all together, that's a perfect Christmas for me." The sting in my eyes told me tears were close. If she were still alive, things would be different. She would never have let me sit outside the circle, cast aside like an unwanted guest. She would have reminded Mark that the bond between father and son isn't something measured by whether others felt comfortable. But Linda was gone, and here I was, trudging forward, a shadow drifting through the cold night. I stopped across the street from a brightly lit house. Through the wide window, I saw a family gathered around their table. Children squealed with delight as they ripped open their presents, adults clinking glasses, exchanging warm smiles. My chest tightened as I stared. That should have been me, grandfather, father, welcomed at the center of laughter. Instead, I was outside, watching through glass, no more than a stranger. Shame rose in my throat, choking me. I felt like a beggar, not for money, but for love, for affection from my own blood. I had poured in hundreds of thousands of dollars, my strength, my years of labor, and what did I receive? To be cast away, branded as an inconvenience. I kept walking. On the sidewalk, a group of kids dashed past, candy canes in their hands, shouting, "Merry Christmas!" Their laughter rang out, pure, unburdened. I nodded, forcing a smile, but inside I was hollow. Their cheer only deepened the sense of how small, how utterly alone I had become. A harsh gust of wind struck my face, making me stumble. I raised my hand to shield myself, and felt the rough skin, the calluses that had built homes, carried bricks, held my son's tiny hand when I guided him across the street. Hands that once lifted him high onto my shoulders to watch the Christmas parade in downtown Dallas. Now those same hands trembled, useless, powerless to hold on to a bond that had slipped away. My mind replayed last Christmas. Beneath that very tree in Mark's living room, I had cradled my granddaughter on my lap. She giggled uncontrollably as I deepened my voice, pretending to be Santa Claus. Mark sat nearby, smiling at the sight of father and child together. Emily busied herself in the kitchen, but at least then I had a place. I belonged. And yet, in just 1 year, I had become the outsider, the source of discomfort. My chest ached as if invisible hands were squeezing the life from me. The bitterness spread through my body, turning every breath into a slash of pain. I had never felt so small, so humiliated, so ashamed in my entire life. I stopped under a street lamp, its pale yellow light casting my shadow long and thin on the pavement. My body shook as I leaned against the cold metal post, exhaling sharply into the night air. In that moment, I knew I had been pushed to the very bottom. But I also understood something else. From the bottom, there is only one way left to go up. The night after that humiliation, I sat alone at my kitchen table. The apartment was silent, save for the faint hum of the old refrigerator. In front of me lay a stack of bank statements, neatly arranged in a folder I had kept for years. I flipped through the pages slowly, my hands steady now, no longer trembling. Each line was a reminder, a record of the money I had sent, month after month, year after year, 5 years, over $180,000. Every dollar meant to give my son a life, a roof, a chance to stand tall. Instead, those dollars had bought me rejection. They had bought me humiliation. I stared at the numbers. $3,000. $3,000. $3,000. Month after month, like clockwork, my sacrifice printed in black ink, undeniable. I traced a finger down the page, and it hit me this wasn't charity anymore. It was shackles, and I had bound myself willingly. No more. I grabbed the phone, punched in the number of the bank. When the line connected, my voice was firm, steel in every word. "This is Richard Walker. I want to cancel all automatic transfers to Mark Walker's account, effective immediately." There was a pause on the other end. The clerk repeated my words back, confirming, "Yes, sir. Cancel all transfers. As of tonight, there will be no further deductions." I exhaled, long and slow. For the first time in years, the weight on my chest eased. I felt lighter, as if invisible chains had snapped and fallen away. I set the phone down and walked to the bathroom. The man in the mirror looked back at me, wrinkled skin, gray hair, tired eyes. But behind the fatigue, something else burned, something I hadn't seen in a long time. Resolve. I leaned closer, my reflection steady. "They think I'm an ATM? A bottomless wallet?" I whispered. "Number, I am more than that. I am their father. I am a man, and I am done being used." The bitterness in my chest no longer felt like poison. It felt like fuel. My humiliation had become fire, and that fire demanded action. I splashed cold water on my face, straightened my back. The years of bending, of yielding, of swallowing insult after insult, they ended tonight. They had pushed me aside. They had mocked my worth. They had treated me as disposable. And in doing so, they had awakened something they would soon regret. I returned to the table, gathered the bank statements, bills, receipts, every scrap of evidence of my sacrifice. I placed them neatly in a folder, closed it with deliberate care. This wasn't just paper. This was proof. Proof of every lie they had told, every mask they had worn. And I knew exactly what I would do with it. The thought sent a shiver through me, not of fear, but of anticipation. For years I had been silent. For years I had believed patience, love, and money would mend every rift. But now silence had become complicity, and I refused to be complicit any longer. I stood tall in the dim light of the apartment, a strange calmness settling over me. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. Instead, there was clarity, a rare, razor-sharp clarity. I thought of Linda. If she could see me now, she would no longer see a man broken by rejection, but a man reborn in defiance. A man finally choosing dignity over appeasement. This was not the end. This was the beginning. I clenched my fists, feeling strength course through me. For the first time in years, I wasn't living for Mark or Emily or anyone else. I was living for myself, and with that came power. The phone rang close to noon. The screen lit up with Emily's name. I hesitated for a moment before answering. Her voice came sharp, cold, commanding. "Richard, this afternoon you need to go pick up my parents from the airport. Their flight lands at 4. Don't be late." I stayed silent for a beat, closing my eyes, drawing in a long breath. The words from the night before echoed in my head. "You don't deserve to sit at the same table." I opened my eyes, my voice calm but ice cold. "Last night you told me I wasn't worthy of being at your family dinner, so why today am I suddenly good enough to be your chauffeur?" On the other end, Emily sucked in a sharp breath, then let out a mocking laugh. "Don't you dare talk back to me. Remember, you're just a lonely old man. Nobody needs you, except for your money." My grip on the phone tightened, my knuckles whitening. My chest rose and fell faster, anger surging through me. But I didn't shout. Instead, my voice dropped, low and cutting like a blade. "If all I am is a wallet, then as of today, the wallet is closed." Silence. Then Emily's voice snapped back, shrill, venomous. "You think you can just stop? You forget this house is in Mark's and my name. Everyone sees it as ours. You're just the one who paid for it. The moment you're gone, it'll all belong to us anyway." My heart jolted. For a second, my body went rigid, as if someone had driven a knife straight through me. I could hear the heavy thud of my own heartbeat, suffocating, relentless. Slowly, I forced out the words, each one like a hammer strike. "What did you just say?" Emily inhaled sharply, realizing her slip. But instead of taking it back, she let out a cruel laugh. "You heard me. We've already thought it through. Once you're dead, this house will be entirely ours. Did you really think you still had a place in this family?" My mind roared with emptiness. I clenched my free hand so tightly that my nails dug into my skin, sharp pain shooting through my palm. But I barely felt it. All I could feel was a cold, crushing void. The room around me seemed to shrink. The faded wallpaper, the worn wooden table, the dim light filtering through the curtains, all of it pressed in, suffocating me. Emily's voice kept going, shrill, cutting, dripping with contempt, but my ears had turned deaf. I couldn't make out the words anymore. All I heard was the truth. They had never seen me as family. To them, I was nothing but a walking ATM. I ended the call. My hand trembled as I lowered the phone, sweat beading across my forehead. The device slipped onto the table, striking the wood with a sharp crack. I sat there, breath shallow, ragged. Linda's face rose in my mind again. She had always believed that the bond between father and son could endure anything. But what I had just heard shattered that belief into pieces. This wasn't just rejection. It was betrayal. A betrayal carefully nurtured, calculated, and cold. I pressed my palms against the table and pushed myself to my feet. My eyes caught the mirror hanging crooked on the wall. The reflection staring back was hollow-cheeked, eyes bloodshot, but deep within them glimmered something fierce, something alive. The next morning, just as I poured myself a cup of black coffee, I heard a faint thud at the door. I bent down and picked up the morning paper that had been shoved through the slot. My hands trembled, the rising steam from the cup brushing against my cheek. Right there on the front page, the headline screamed at me in bold letters, "Retired businessman abandons elderly couple at airport during winter storm." And beneath it, a photo of me, an old, blurred picture taken from God knows where. The angle made me look like a criminal, hollow-eyed, cold, uncaring. I froze. The room fell deathly silent. The ticking of the wall clock seemed to slow, the steam from my coffee curling upward and dissolving into the heavy air. Everything around me felt drained of life. I lowered myself into the chair, eyes glued to the words. Richard Walker, once the owner of a small construction company, heartlessly neglected his duty, leaving his daughter-in-law's parents stranded for hours in the blizzard at Dallas Airport. Sources claim this is not the first time Walker has displayed selfish behavior, thinking only of himself. My jaw clenched. The article went further, quoting a so-called neighbor. He always acted generous, but in truth, he only cared about appearances. I set the paper down. A dry, bitter laugh tore from my throat, echoing in the dim apartment. It didn't sound human. It sounded like madness. So this was their plan, not just to cut me out of the family, but to bury me in the eyes of the public as well. I reached for the coffee, took a sip. The liquid was ice cold, the bitterness crawling down my throat. My gaze drifted across the room, the worn wooden table scarred with years of use, the faded wallpaper, the ragged curtain letting in dull light. The place felt like a prison. My phone buzzed, a message from an old colleague. Richard, is it true? The paper says you left them stranded in the storm. I didn't reply. A few minutes later, more messages came. Are you okay? I can't believe you'd do that. I'm disappointed in you. My vision blurred. So that was all it took, one article, and years of trust collapsed. I buried my face in my hands. My body shook. Despair gripped me like iron claws. My family had abandoned me. Now society turned its back as well. I had nothing left. And yet through the tears, something sparked. I remembered the first transfers. $3,000 this month, $3,000 the next. For 5 years, over $180,000. Each time I told myself, one day Mark will understand. He'll appreciate this. But the truth now blazed clear. That money had not bought love. It had only bought contempt. I rose from my chair and walked to the wooden cabinet. From the bottom drawer I pulled out a thick stack of folders. Inside lay the proof bank statements, receipts, loan documents, every page a testament to the sweat, labor, and sacrifice I had poured into their lives. I spread them across the table. The numbers marched down in endless rows, cold and unforgiving. $3,000. $3,000. $3,000. Month after month, year after year, I ran the totals. The figure glared back at me. Over $180,000. I sat, staring at the papers. Emily's voice echoed in my skull. You're just a wallet with legs. Then her final blow. When you're dead, this house will be ours. Another laugh burst from me, but this time it wasn't bitter. It was sharp, cold, resolute. They wanted to paint me as the villain? They wanted to spread their lies? Fine. Then I would bring out the truth. I would show the world who had been living off whom. I gathered the papers carefully, aligning them, clipping them into one thick folder. I set it squarely in the center of the table, my palm pressing down firmly on the cover. My heartbeat thudded in my chest, not with despair anymore, but with fire. I lifted my gaze to the window. Outside, snow fell in thick sheets, blanketing Dallas in silence. But within me, a different storm had begun. Christmas Eve. Snow blanketed the streets of Dallas, the glow of holiday lights spilling from every home, dazzling and alive. I put on my old suit, the same one I had worn to countless family gatherings in years past, and carried the thick folder firmly in my hand. Each step I took down the brick walkway echoed in the quiet night, slow yet resolute, like the final drumbeats of a long, bitter play. The door opened, and warmth rushed out. Inside, the atmosphere overflowed with festivity, laughter, clinking glasses, the smell of roasted turkey filling the air. On the long dining table, red wine sparkled beneath the chandelier. Friends, colleagues of Mark and Emily gathered, their voices bright, but the moment I stepped inside, the room froze. Silence fell. Dozens of eyes turned to me, wide with confusion, some with discomfort. I didn't speak right away. Instead, I walked straight to the table, pulled out a chair, and set down the heavy folder. The sharp thud reverberated like a gavel. I opened it, letting the pages spill across the table: bank statements, loan papers, receipts, cold numbers, clear evidence. The whispers began almost instantly. He paid for all of this? My God, the entire house, the dinners, everything. Faces shifted: surprise, disbelief, shame. Emily's face drained of color, her hands gripping her wine glass so tightly it trembled. Mark's head hung low, his shoulders hunched, unable to meet anyone's gaze. I looked around the room, calm, collected. No fury, no pleading. My voice rang steady, deep. This is the last Christmas dinner I will ever pay for. From now on, you take care of yourselves. The silence grew heavier, pressing down on everyone. No one dared speak. I closed the folder, pushed it toward Mark, and rose to my feet. My footsteps echoed as I crossed the room, slow but firm. No one moved to stop me. The door closed behind me, and a gust of icy air swept over me. Outside, snow fell thick under the golden glow of the street lamps. I breathed in deeply, and for the first time in years, my chest felt light. With each step away from that house, another shackle seemed to fall away. Back in my small apartment, I went to the cabinet and pulled out a bottle of whiskey, Linda's favorite. Dust coated the glass, but I smiled faintly as I wiped it clean. I had avoided opening it for years, fearing that drinking alone would only drag me deeper into grief. But tonight was different. I poured a glass, the rich scent rising to meet me. The burn of the first sip warmed my throat, spreading through my chest. In that moment, I could almost see Linda across from me, her gentle eyes, her soft smile, as if she were still here, sharing one more Christmas. I picked up my phone and typed a message, my fingers unsteady but certain. "Sister, I'll come to your place for New Year's dinner." Minutes later, her reply lit up the screen. "We'll be waiting. You are, and always will be, part of this family." I leaned back in my chair, eyes drifting to the window. Outside, the night sky shimmered with Christmas lights strung across the neighborhood. I lifted my glass of whiskey, whispering softly, as though to Linda herself. "Do you see, love? At last I've found my peace again." A quiet smile touched my lips. Not bitter, not forced. A smile of release. I understood, finally. Family is not bound by blood. Family is the people who truly want you there. Life rarely grants us perfect endings. Sometimes what we receive from those we love most is not a warm embrace, but a cold and merciless turning away. And in those moments of abandonment, we come to realize peace is not found where we expect it. It is found where we dare to choose it for ourselves. Richard spent years living in sacrifice, swallowing silence, convincing himself that money could mend cracks and that family bonds would triumph over every misunderstanding. But he eventually saw the truth. When a relationship is built only on exploitation, silence becomes complicity. And the true turning point came when he chose to stand up not out of vengeance, but to reclaim his dignity and to find peace within his own soul. Each of our lives is different, yet the pain of betrayal, of loneliness, is something we all understand. And just like Richard, you too have the right to step out of the shadows and into the light. Peace is never handed to us as a gift. It comes only when we are brave enough to say enough, and when we choose to open our hearts to people and places that truly deserve us. And what about you? If one day your family turned its back on you, what would you do to find peace again? If you felt something in this story, consider following this channel to share in more journeys, more lessons, more slices of life. Because sometimes listening to someone else's story can help us discover the path to our own.